Hello, comrades. I'm Marlène. I'm a political activist, but I will talk as an academic. And my presentation will be more focused on the effect of European integration and the EU on France and on fascism in France. So, as you know, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, started a program to rearm Europe. And she said this is Europe's moment. So in a time when Trump is trying to negotiate peace with Ukraine, well, of course, peace at his advantage. And at the same time, Christine Lagarde from the ECB says this moment of change is an opportunity for Europe. It is a global Euro moment. So we have at one time the European army, and at the other time a global Euro. So two aspects of a state. And in the press, in the media, they all say that it was a pivotal moment for Europe. It was Europe's strategic independence. It was also an electroshock that Europe needs, as Macron says, and it was European defense shift. So all the press welcomes this very, very positively as an independence of Europe from the United States. But in the meantime, the US are very happy of this kind of new policy, new European state. This is what we can read here. So thanks to the European Defense Fund, the US will be able to send more arms. So the question I'm asking here is how much autonomy can Europe have from the US? And the second one is what are the consequences regarding democracy and fascism in France? So the thesis I'm defending here is that there is no significant contradiction between US and European big capital in the process of European state-making, and far right in France is representing more and more transatlantic bourgeoisie. And I will demonstrate my thesis in 3 points. The first is EU structural selectivity for big capital. The second part is big capital is a transatlantic bourgeoisie. And in the third part, we will analyze the effects of this on democracy and fascism in France. So very, very briefly, this is the Lisbon Treaty, and these are the competencies of European Union. So we can see that the exclusive competencies of European Union are custom unions, competition policy, monetary policy, and common commercial policy. And we can see that competencies that states have are social policy, basically. So it means that economic competencies, which are competencies that interest employers, capital, are in the end of the European Union, whereas social competencies, which are of the interest of workers, are in the end of states. But in the EU, there is a norms hierarchy that says that European law prevails over national law. So for the EU, it means that there is a structural selectivity in favor of employers' interests and not in favor of workers' interests. So can we conclude that the European Union has overcome nation states? It's more complicated than that, because if we look at informal decision-making, we can see that actually, for example, in the economic sectors, states are also participating. For example, in the Eurogroup or Euro Working Group, which is made of different of the Eurozone ministries of treasuries, also bureaucrats from the ECB, bureaucrats from the Commission, and we can see that the activity of the Eurogroup is getting higher and higher after the crisis, and during the crisis and after the crisis, it's still very high. So basically, we have like a common dynamic between European institutions and states going in the same direction. And for the European defense policies, it is the same. There is no opposition between states and the EU. And for example, Rearm Europe was a dynamic from the Commission. So having that in mind, that there is no opposition between states and EU institutions, but they are coming in the same direction, the question I'm asking here is, what is the political economy of this? Does that mean that the European and national technocrats condense the interest of a European bourgeoisie, a bourgeoisie organized at the EU scale? And we could imagine that, yes, we are seeing like the formation of a European bourgeoisie, and we could imagine that in unilateral times of the US policy. For example, during the huge war that the US are doing without the approval of Europeans. For example, during the Kosovo War, some Italian interests were actually destroyed, and this is the example of the Fiat factories. During the Iraq War, Total, so the most important oil French firm, lost lots of contracts, and the contract of the exploitation of the Majnoun oil fields. And during the Ukrainian war, the German capital is losing. So here you can have the different, for example, German companies that are losing with the sanction against Russia. So we could imagine that the EU and this common dynamic with the European states is representing a kind of European bourgeoisie. And in this moment of unilateralism from the US, when US touch European capital, we can hear some speeches, some discourses coming from European member states which actually criticize the United States. So for example, during the Iraq War, you have this summit organized in April 2003 with France, Germany, Belgium, and Luxembourg. So 4 countries that didn't agree with the Iraq War of the US, and they say basically, they expressed concern that the European industry could be reduced to the status of subcontractor to major American contractors. So here we have kind of a way to imagine an autonomy from European capital, an autonomy of European capital from the US. And today, in the rivalry with China, we have Macron, the president of France, saying that the new paradigm in terms of defense is a credible defense of the European continent. We must build a Europe capable of demonstrating that it is never a vassal of the United States of America. So here again, we can hear some criticism of European leaders, and we could imagine that it is because their own capital, the European capital, is affected by US unilateralism. However, it is all the contrary, actually. If we look at the most important European lobby, which is called the ERT, which is a European Roundtable, European Industrialist Roundtable, which was founded in 1983 by the Commission. We can see that it has some of the biggest European multinationals in the industrial sector. So you have like Philips, Fiat, Volvo, etc., etc. But if we look at this lobby and at the political economy of this lobby now, we can see that it is neither industrial and neither European. So these are the different companies of the ERT. And we can see that 25% of the capital is owned by US investment funds. But 25 is not so much. I mean, we could debate on that. But one indicator that we cannot debate, I mean, I guess we can, but has a Marxist, and this is a Poulantzasian indicator to measure kind of imperialism, foreign direct investment. We can see that between 1982 and 2020, the share of US direct investment directed toward Europe increased from an already solid basis of 44% to 60%. So we can see that today foreign direct investment are growing in Europe. So yes, we have a very important transatlantic integration in terms of capital. And if we look at what it means regarding European foreign policy, and if we take the example of Rearm Europe, we can see that, for example, European Defense Fund is open to US arms subsidiaries. We can see also that the transatlantic bourgeoisie is totally in favor of Rearm Europe. So we have the example of the president of Google, EMEA, which is a Google subsidiary in Europe. He is in favor of the European Defense Fund, such as the ERT, so the lobby of European multinationals. So basically, these are the two indicators of a transatlantic bourgeoisie. In one part, US subsidiaries, and on the other part, European capital integrated into US finance. So yes, so now we have seen that European integration, European Union condensed the interests of a transatlantic bourgeoisie. What about workers? If we take the example of the euro crisis in 2008, we can see that the crisis has a different temporality regarding the economy of the country. So first, the crisis started at the end of 1928 in Germany, for example, in the center of Europe, in the core Europe. In the end of 2008, it affected central countries. And in 2010, it affected southern European countries. So you have the crisis affecting different temporalities, the European space. And what about social movements? You have that social movement has also different temporalities, of course. So the social movement started in the East, for example. The social movement followed the different temporality of the crisis. So it started in the north, then it touched the east, and at the end, southern Europe. So this is very difficult to imagine a European social movement hitting in the same time the European Commission, since social movements have different temporality and also different subjectivities. We can see that in the East, it's more right-wing subjectivities, whereas in the South, it's more left-wing subjectivities. So this is difficult to imagine a common social movement at the European level. So it means that the European Union doesn't condense the interests of workers in itself, in its policy, whereas we saw in the opposite, that the EU condensed the interest of a transatlantic bourgeoisie. So this means that the European Union is an open road for the transatlantic bourgeoisie to advance its interest in opposition to the workers' interests. So now we're going to see the effects of this political economy in France and in the political spectrum. So yes, so as the European Union is an open road for the transatlantic bourgeoisie, it means that protests are never never listen, and this is the example of the referendum in Europe that have never been respected. And in France, it is the case in 2005 with the treaty with the European Constitution Treaty, which was asked to the people to express themselves, and they say no, but it was obviously condensed in the Lisbon Treaty. So, in consequence, the majority of the people in France is Eurosceptic. So France is the second most Eurosceptic country after Greece. So this is this graph on the right. You can see France. And the most important reason why French people is Eurosceptic is not racism, but it's because they are against globalization. The third graph is showing how much people vote for Eurosceptic parties, and the violet color is showing that you vote for more Eurosceptic countries. So the basic consequence of that is that people in France vote for Eurosceptic parties. So we have a restructuration of the political spectrum in France. The cleavage right now is not right or left, is against or for globalization. So the A plus B are the bloc that defend the European Union, and C plus D are the blocs that contest European Union. So A is to the right and pro-European Union, which is Macron, basically, the president of France. B is the left, and which is pro-European Union, and B is Socialist Party and the ecologist. Now you have C. C is the far right, the RN, before this election. I mean, before 2020, more or less, because it has changed, and this is what we will see next step. And D is La France Insoumise, the left, which criticized the European Union. But what happened in the last election? In the last European election in France, and this is a very specificity of France regarding all the European countries, Macron lost, actually. The extreme center of Macron, which is, we can see this in his Renaissance, LREM, the second bloc, lost election because the people voting for Macron before, now they voted for Marine Le Pen, for the RN, for the far right. And if we look at the social composition of this electorate, of this vote, we can see that the people who before voted for Macron were rich people. They were basically managers and employers. So these people, now, they vote for Marine Le Pen, so the far right. And these people are pro-European people. So basically you have, with the European Union, we have a transformation of the Marine Le Pen party, which is becoming more and more a trans class, and welcoming the former voters of Macron, which are pro-Europeans. So basically, the RN now has a social basis corresponding to the transatlantic bourgeoisie in Europe. So better Hitler than the Front Populaire, as we said, as we always said. So in a conclusion, we saw that the European Union was a condensation of contradictory interests, contradictory but not too much, and basically the European Union is condensating European transatlantic bourgeoisie, whereas social movements cannot express themselves, which led this transatlantic bourgeoisie at the end has chosen fascist parties, which is the RN or fascist or far-right parties, to save its interest, facing the rivalry with China and the power of LFI, which is the left in France. Thank you.